I pressed my palm against the cool glass of my apartment window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny promises. My phone buzzed again, and I resisted the urge to check it immediately, knowing exactly who it was. My silk blouse brushed softly against my skin as I leaned back into the warmth of my kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the room, a ritual I'd adopted to steady myself before anything remotely emotional could touch me. It was strange, feeling this calm, yet electric mix of pride and lingering hurt. My life looked flawless from the outside, a sleek apartment downtown, my own catering business booming, invitations to culinary events, and a feature in a national magazine. But some truths I kept locked away, memories that still whispered with sharp edges. Then the notification appeared, a message from my mom. The words jumped off the screen, each one like a tiny sting. She was coming to town, she wrote, and wanted to see what I'd done with my little hobby. My heart tightened, not from excitement, but from the familiar twinge of doubt she always managed to plant, the same doubt I'd carried since my teenage years when she'd scoffed at my cooking. I exhaled slowly, letting the memory wash over me. The insults, the laughter that wasn't mine, the endless questioning of whether I was good enough. But now, standing here with the hum of the city below, I felt a quiet, unshakable thrill. They were about to see the woman I'd become. The girl she dismissed had won far more than her approval. I remember that night like it was etched in my skin. I was 17, wearing an apron that smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic, standing in a kitchen that had always felt more like a battlefield than a home. My mom hovered behind me, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as I plated my latest attempt at a homemade lasagna. "You call this cooking?" she snapped, the words slicing through the air sharper than any knife in my hand. Even a child could do better. The lump in my throat tightened, and I could barely breathe. My hand shook, and the sauce I had carefully spooned onto the plate trembled, spilling slightly onto the countertop. I had spent hours perfecting this dish, trying desperately to impress her, to earn a scrap of recognition that always seemed just out of reach. But she only shook her head and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling smaller than the marble tiles beneath my feet. Grandma's words echoed in my mind, the soft voice that had always nurtured the fire inside me. "Never let anyone dull your spark, darling," she had said, handing me a small, worn notebook filled with her recipes and scribbled notes from decades of cooking. "These are your weapons. Keep them close. One day, they'll take you places even they can't imagine." That night, alone in the dim glow of the kitchen light, I opened the notebook and traced the lines of her handwriting with trembling fingers. Something shifted inside me, a quiet, stubborn defiance that settled in my chest like a heartbeat. I realized then that my worth wouldn't come from approval I might never receive. It would come from the fire I carried, the dedication I could summon, and the creativity I refused to hide. I washed the lasagna plate, wiping away not just the spilled sauce, but the weight of her judgment. I made a promise to myself that night, under the hum of the refrigerator and the faint scent of basil lingering in the air, I would show her and everyone else that I was capable, that my cooking, my talent, and my dreams were worth more than a dismissive glance or a cruel comment. By the time I went to bed, the anger had softened into determination. I wasn't just going to survive her criticism. I was going to rise above it. I was going to carve a life that even she couldn't ignore. The fire Grandma ignited in me that night never went out. I spent years secretly honing my skills, experimenting with flavors in borrowed kitchens and small weekend catering gigs. Every dish I created was a step away from the girl who had stood trembling in my mother's kitchen and toward the woman who believed in her own talent. I sent out resumes, worked at local cafes, and occasionally got rejected, but each no only fueled the quiet defiance inside me. It wasn't easy. I remember late nights hunched over recipe books at a tiny kitchen table, my laptop glowing in the corner, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, and scribbling notes in the margins of Grandma's old notebook. There were times I cried, exhausted and lonely, wondering if I was chasing a dream that might never see the light of day. But there were also small victories, The first time a customer raved about my homemade pasta, the first thank you note from a client who said my food reminded them of home, the first weekend I managed to cover my rent entirely from my cooking. Each moment was a brick in the foundation I was building. And then, almost unexpectedly, she appeared, my mentor, a woman named Rachel, the owner of a popular boutique catering company in the city. Rachel saw something in me that no one else had, not just the talent, but the persistence, the hunger, the care I put into every dish. You're not like the others, she told me on our first day together, flipping through my handwritten recipes. You don't just cook. You create memories. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. With Rachel's guidance, I pushed further. I entered small competitions, each one a test of nerves, skill, and endurance. Long nights in her kitchen, experimenting with flavors I had only dreamed of before, became my normal. I learned to balance heat, texture, and aroma, to plate food in ways that told a story. I studied the business side too. Marketing, social media, branding. I became a one-woman storm, building my skills, my confidence, and my independence all at once. But through it all, I kept my successes hidden from my family. I posted modest updates online, nothing that screamed, I've made it, avoiding details that would trigger their scrutiny or prideful interference. I wanted to see what I could achieve on my own, without needing their approval. Each milestone, from my first high-profile client to the first feature in a local magazine, was a secret thrill, a quiet, satisfying rebellion. The pinnacle of this secret life came when I auditioned for a televised cooking competition. The nerve-wracking rounds, the cameras, the bright lights, and the scrutiny of judges were daunting, but I felt a strange calm. This was my proving ground, not for them, but for myself. Each challenge reminded me of that 17-year-old girl, trembling in her apron, desperate for a scrap of recognition. Only now I was in control. I had the skill, the creativity, and the unshakable belief that no insult, no dismissal, could ever define me again. And when my name was announced as the winner, I felt an elation so deep it seemed to shake my very bones. I had done it. Every late night, every tear, every moment of doubt had led to this, proof that I could succeed entirely on my own terms, unseen but unstoppable. The day my mom arrived, I waited in my apartment, letting the afternoon sunlight stretch across my polished wooden floors. I had carefully arranged everything, the kitchen spotless, fresh herbs on the counter, my awards from the cooking competition displayed subtly but unmistakably, and my feature article in the magazine framed on the wall. I didn't rush to greet her immediately. This wasn't about manners. It was about letting her see, really see, who I had become. When she finally stepped inside, I noticed the quick, unconsciously measured glance she gave the room. She lingered on the minimalist decor, the gleam of stainless steel countertops, and then, almost hesitantly, her eyes fell on the awards. I didn't move. I just let her take it in, the recognition, the trophies, the proof that I had not just survived, but excelled. Wow, this place, it's impressive, she stammered, voice tight, almost as if the words were foreign to her mouth. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw hesitation in her gaze instead of judgment. I finally spoke, letting the words roll off my tongue with measured calm. You remember how you used to insult my cooking, right? How you said I'd never amount to anything in the kitchen. My voice was even, almost soft, but every word carried the weight of years spent proving myself. She nodded slowly, a flicker of shame crossing her face. Well, I did more than just amount to something. I won a national cooking competition. I've been featured in magazines, run my own catering business, and built my life exactly the way I wanted. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I could almost see the disbelief like a cloud hovering over her. You won, she whispered, voice cracking. Yes, I said, letting the word hang in the air. I gestured around the apartment, letting the details speak. The awards, the accolades, the magazines, the kitchen perfectly curated to reflect my journey. All of this. Every late night, every rejection, every time you told me I wasn't good enough, it all led here. And I did it without your approval. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then her eyes flicked down at my hands, where a faint smudge of flour lingered from the bread I had been preparing. That tiny, unpolished detail, my fingerprints on the countertop, reminded her that this wasn't a show or luck. This was my life, my talent, my dedication. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and a whisper of guilt passed through her expression. I didn't rush to fill the silence with excuses or soften my words. This wasn't about making her comfortable, it was about truth. About her finally realizing that the girl she dismissed had transformed into a woman she could no longer ignore. You've really done it, she said finally, voice barely audible. The pride in her tone was unsteady, almost foreign, but it was there. She had glimpsed the reality of my success, the life I had built, the person I had become, and it was undeniable. I let a slow smile spread across my face, a mixture of satisfaction and quiet triumph. Yes, I said again. And the best part? I did it all while you were busy underestimating me. So now, the choice is yours. You can learn from this, or you can watch from the sidelines. But I'm no longer the girl you used to belittle. I am the woman I promised myself I'd become. And with that, I stepped back, letting her take in the full weight of the revelation. Every award, every accolade, every carefully prepared detail of my life shouted the truth. The girl she mocked was gone. In her place stood someone unstoppable. The moment of revelation shifted something irreversibly. I saw the hesitation in my mother's eyes, the uncertainty in her posture. For years, she had dictated how I should think, act, and even dream. But now, the power had quietly, undeniably shifted. I wasn't the girl trembling in the kitchen anymore. I was the woman who had turned rejection into triumph. I stood tall, letting my presence fill the room. If you want to be a part of my life now, I said slowly, measuring each word, it won't be on the terms you're used to. This isn't about control or approval anymore. This is about respect, accountability, and growth. Her eyes widened slightly, the flicker of resistance in her expression softening. I continued. First, you need to let go of judgment. Criticism isn't love. I need honesty, support, and encouragement, not belittlement. If you can't offer that, we can't move forward. She swallowed hard, and I saw the recognition in her gaze. She knew, deep down, the truth of my words. Second, I said, you need to acknowledge the past and own your mistakes. I don't need apologies to forgive you, but I need you to understand how your words shaped me and how I survived and thrived in spite of them. I took a step closer, letting the warmth of my presence mix with firm authority. Third, you must pursue something meaningful for yourself. Don't cling to old patterns or try to live through my accomplishments. Find what excites you, what challenges you, and put energy into that. Growth is universal, and it's overdue for you. My voice softened, though my eyes remained steady. I care about you. I always will. But I won't bend to old cycles of criticism, comparison, or resentment. If you truly want to be part of my life, these conditions aren't negotiable. They're about creating space for both of us to heal, to thrive, and to respect each other as adults. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I could see the weight of my words settling in her chest, the beginnings of reflection. This was not punishment. It was an invitation, an opportunity for her to transform the way we related, and for me to continue asserting my worth without compromise. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power in my hands, not through revenge, but through clarity and self-respect. I wasn't punishing her. I was defining boundaries that protected my growth, my confidence, and my future. Every stipulation was a bridge to a healthier relationship, should she choose to cross it. And as I watched her absorb everything, a subtle shift occurred. She straightened, slowly nodding, perhaps understanding for the first time that her daughter was no longer a reflection of her control, but an independent, unstoppable woman. I had won far more than a competition. I had won the authority to shape my life, my rules, and my relationships. This was the true victory, more lasting than any trophy or accolade. The power was mine, tempered with sea. In the weeks that followed, I watched subtle changes unfold. My mother started to ask about my work with genuine curiosity, no judgments or critiques hidden in her tone. She experimented in the kitchen herself, trying out small recipes and occasionally sending me photos of her attempts. It was awkward at first, the humility clashing with her pride, but gradually, she seemed to embrace the idea that growth was possible at any age. I also reflected on my own journey, how far I had come from that 17-year-old girl standing in a kitchen with trembling hands and a lump in her throat. Every late night, every rejection, every tiny victory had shaped me into the woman I had become. And yet, it wasn't just about the external success, the magazine features, the competition win, or my thriving business. It was about the resilience, patience, and courage I had cultivated along the way. The old notebook Grandma had given me still rested on my kitchen counter, its worn pages filled with smudged handwriting and hand-drawn diagrams. Sometimes I would open it and trace her words with my fingers, feeling the weight of her love and wisdom. "Never let anyone dull your spark, darling," she had said. That spark had carried me through doubt, ridicule, and isolation. And now, it shone brighter than ever, illuminating not just my career, but my self-respect and confidence. I realized that true empowerment wasn't only about proving others wrong. It was about defining your life on your own terms, shaping your world through your choices, and embracing your value without seeking validation. I had done all that, and the most profound victory was the quiet satisfaction that came from inner strength rather than applause. As I prepared a new dish in my sunlit kitchen, the scent of basil and roasting garlic filling the air, I smiled. I thought of every hard moment, every insult, and every challenge that had led me here. And I spoke to myself softly, as if narrating my story for the world to hear. I am the woman I promised myself I'd become. I am talented, I am resilient, and I am enough. And no one, not even those who doubted me, can take that away. It was more than a declaration. It was a quiet anthem of triumph, independence, and grace. I had learned to honor the past without letting it chain me, to embrace the present with full confidence, and to step into the future knowing that my worth was mine alone. And in that moment, standing in my kitchen, I felt utterly, completely, and unapologetically free. Bottom of form,